Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started now. My name is Anne Nicholson. I'm a professor and the Dean of the Faculty of IT here at Monash University. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting here today on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional owners and custodians of this unceded lands, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to also acknowledge the First Nations people of the lands from which people might be joining us remotely, and also any Indigenous colleagues that are joining us here today. I did want to also just say that this is obviously a tough time for some of our Indigenous colleagues and community with leading up to the referendum. So I'm just really mindful of that. And we want to be particularly supportive at this time. So today, though, I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural Ada Lovelace Day. It's the Australian Women in IT yesterday, today and tomorrow. So I'd really like to begin by thanking the organisers, the people who came up with the idea. So I know that's Barbara, Judy, I know Yolandi was involved, and of course the marketing and comms team as well. Thank them for this event, and also the Piercy Foundation who are sponsoring it, and that's particularly the support of Dr. Peter Thorne, who taught me as an undergraduate. So held annually in October, Ada Lovelace Day celebrates a skilled mathematician from the 19th century who helped take the first computer built by Charles Babbage and think about how it could be used for computation. So in that sense, Ada Lovelace is credited as the world's first computer programmer. Although if you actually look at the notes, maybe it looks like half maths, half programming. And it's a day, the Ada Lovelace Day is a day that over time has evolved to celebrate not just that one woman's incredible impact and the starting contributions to computing in STEM, but the countless women who've continued her legacy. So throughout history, women have always been interested in those disciplines, but to pursue those interests, they've had to overcome really significant barriers such as gender biases, societal expectation, unequal educational opportunities, and so on. So really been hamstrung. Now, personally, growing up, I was one of those nerdy students, but I had a particular interest in maths and physics, as it was then. I actually never got exposed to computers at all during my schooling. So I gravitated to those subjects at university, thought I was going to do physics or something, but then had the opportunity to start doing first-year computer science and really just fell in love with it. And it really matched that kind of interest in abstraction and problem solving, and just found it really intellectually interesting, but also turning it into real solutions, so which is great. And so I've, become the academic that I am, but it did start from that time, and I'm really, I've had the opportunities to collaborate with, experts, collaborators, work with students from around the world, and, had such a positive career in this area myself. And it's really been an honour to be part of that. And now I'm very proud to lead the faculty unfortunately, as the first woman, but, as that first woman dean of the faculty. So without the progress championed by women such as Ada Lovelace, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. And that's why I think it's really important, even on the personal level, that we all sort of acknowledge them, but also as institutionally as Australia's leading faculty of IT. So STEM fields are traditionally viewed as male dominated and have been. And it's often by celebrating it, we're looking at those often overlooked hidden figures, if you think about that book and movie, and really highlighting the contributions that women have made. We want to challenge those preconceived notions that may dissuade girls and women from pursuing STEM careers. And we want to empower them to envision themselves in those roles, inspire future generations, really get those young girls excited about the vast opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And Ada Lovelace's legacy shows that women have always had a place in STEM, and that we continue to shape those futures. So today we're really fortunate to have a great lineup of very distinguished women working in STEM. So our speakers today are Professor Judy Sheard, Barbara Ainsworth, the director and curator of the Monash Museum of Computing History. Judy's the director and Barbara's the curator. I should also say, of course, that Judy is a professor in computing education and a leading researcher and educator here. And they'll be introducing us to the life and legacy of Ada Lovelace and discussing that history. And then we'll have a great panel to talk about that broader landscape of women working in STEM, be moderated by Professor Yolandi Stringers, herself an award-winning digital sociologist and our inaugural Associate Dean, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion in our faculty. So the panel includes, now I'm introducing the panel now, or should I leave you to do it later? You can do it later. I'm just mindful of the time. So Leanne will introduce distinguished panelists later. So I really hope that everyone enjoys this event. You know, hopefully we'll all learn something, and then we'll get a chance to, of course, speak to colleagues and build that community of women in STEM and computing that we've got here. So thanks all very much.
Okay, so my job is to talk about Ada Lovelace. Well, she was born in 1815 in London, UK, and she was the daughter of Lord Byron. And he was a famous poet. So she had the father, the poet, and mother was interested in mathematics. So there was this interesting combination of people, her parents. Now, her parents had a disastrous marriage. And at the age of 4 weeks, they separated. Byron went off to Europe and didn't see his daughter for the rest of his life. He died 8 years later. So her mother brought her up. So her mother wanted a non-traditional education for Ada. She wanted her to have a full education. At that time, women were educated to attract a partner, a husband, and also to be able to run a household. But she wanted Ada to have a fuller experience, and she directed her education so it would focus on mathematics and science, because she didn't want Ada to be distracted or be her emotions to be sort of triggered by other subjects, because she was very worried about the Byron family madness that had been around for centuries. So she wanted something sort of stable and logical and quiet for Ada. But Ada was an adventurous, imaginative child, and she did things like she wanted to learn to fly at the age of 12, so she designed wings and organized the materials, ran experiments, wrote a book on flyology. She was very talented at mathematics. She was tutored by Mary Somerville, the Scottish mathematician. So her interests and abilities and also her social sphere meant that she met sort of the leading scientists and mathematicians of the day, people like Michael Faraday, Charles Wheatstone, Augustus de Morgan, and also Charles Babbage. So she had interesting connections with all these people. She was married when she was 20 in 1835 and had 3 children. But then sadly, she died at the age of 36. Okay, so the connection to computing. So at the age of 17, she met Charles Babbage when he was demonstrating his difference, a prototype of his difference engine. And that began a lifelong friendship and also collaboration. So a few years later, Babbage started designing his analytical engine. Now, the difference engine was designed to produce mathematical tables. His idea for the analytical engine was that it would be a programmable machine, and sort of in line with what we might think of as a computer these days. So it was a complicated exercise, and he went and presented it in Turin, and the Italian mathematician Menabrea was there, and he wrote a paper about this analytical machine. And it was in Italian, and Ada was asked to translate it. Now, this was an amazing thing at this time. Women weren't seen as being capable of such things. But she took it on and she translated the paper and produced a series of explanatory notes. Now, the explanatory notes were 3 times longer than the actual paper. So she made a real contribution here. Now, the interesting thing here is note G, the 7th note, set down the process for the analytical engine to calculate a series of Bernoulli numbers using this machine. So this is now acknowledged as the first computer program. So Ada realized that the analytical engine could be more than just a calculator, more than just crunch numbers. It could actually be used to perform abstract operations on symbols. So she envisaged the machine doing algebra, and perhaps even playing music and things like that. So this was 100 years before Turing. This was there, but not really recognised as her contribution wasn't really recognised or acknowledged until 100 years later, when Turing discovered these notes, and then the public awareness of her contribution to the understanding of what machines could do developed. Okay, so what did it look like, this first computer program? If you look at it, as Anne said, it really looks like more mathematics than computers. But she was in the series of operations, she was connecting it to what the machine would be doing, as well as the operations of the mathematics. Okay, so Ada Lovelace, she was imaginative, she was clever, mathematical. She could envisage the potential for machines. And this was amazing when you consider the time. You know, she was female. In those days, females weren't powerful, they weren't visible, but she was able to overcome that. And I think the thing that really probably helped her a lot was the networks that she had. Of course, she was privileged. She was in society, she had money, but she had access to a lot of interesting people and was able to communicate her ideas with them. And I think, you know, to me, it shows the importance of networks as well as having ability. It's the people around you that can help as well. Okay, so now I'll pass over to Barbara, who will talk about women in Australia in the early days of computing.
Ada Lovelace Day marks a time to celebrate the role of women in STEM, and this relates to women in the past as well as the present and the future. I'd like to discuss the different areas where women were able to participate in computing, and both analogue and digital, in the early to mid-20th century in Australia. As we were saying, Ada Lovelace came from a privileged background, and this gave her the opportunity to work in the field of mathematics. This was not the case for most women, and in Australian context, women were present in different areas of computing despite several obstacles. Young women were subject to social expectations, especially in their choices of suitable employment. Economic factors up to the end of the 20th century, or perhaps now, often closed off access to high levels of education. And however, there were sometimes good secondary school teachers to encourage their students into science. If proceeding with their education, female science students were advised to go and study subjects including biology or mathematics, but rarely physics or engineering. When they had gained a degree, their main career choice was often directed towards teaching rather than using their skill sets in practice. Even when working in computing, there were still some roadblocks to making a career. Just getting selected for a position was often difficult if there was a male applicant. Additionally, the federal public service rules stipulated that women had to resign upon marriage. and they could actually reapply for their job as a part-time casual position. However, the same rules stopped women from working after marriage in many cases. The marriage bar was finally removed in 1966, as announced in the CSIRO's little magazine, and women were able to continue. After this, the number of married women working in permanent positions in the public service tripled in the next 3 years. Officially, women also received less pay than men, around 75% of the male rate, and that advert clearly states the different types of pay levels available. Private industry was more accommodating to married women, but all assumed that you would leave work full-time employment if you started a family. The term computer prior to the 1950s was more commonly applied to people rather than the actual machines. And women were often employed as human computers because they were regarded as meticulous, accurate, and as well, they also would undertake long, repetitive tasks. They were also paid less than their male counterparts. It was some of the earliest female computers in Australia were part of an international project to map the entire night sky. At the turn of the 20th century, women were employed at several state observatories to record and measure star positions and on photographs. It was tedious, very detailed, and took hours of concentration. Human computers used a range of desktop calculators, both in commercial and research areas, and they had specialised equipment. And this is just an example of a certification test for a comptometer in the mid-1960s. They had 40 minutes to complete this test using the machine and get certified to go into work in using that area. Mary Whitehead's an interesting example of the women who worked as human computers in the 1940s. She graduated with a mathematics degree and then worked in statistics, but she as a librarian, because she couldn't get a work in statistics. But in 1949, she was put in charge of a group of female computers who were working in South Australia on the Woomera rocket project. She was a professional staff member because she had a degree, and she worked on various projects through her career, and including on the RESAT satellite launched at Woomera in 1967 and retired in 1982. This is a photograph of the women dressed to work out at the Woomera. It was very cold, and Mary had to argue that the women were allowed to wear trousers to go to work, and this was a big change for them. The women worked in this area were able to continue with mathematical studies, but there was very little opportunity for promotion as a career development. The photograph on the right is the computer that the Woomera people were using from 1957. Statistics analysis grew during the 20th century to become much more important, and staff at the CSIRO, such as Betty Allen, had established the value of this in the role of research. Betty Labey, who is photographed here on the right, worked in statistics at the University of Melbourne. Initially, the staff were using desktop equipment, but later worked with computers. And they were calculating in this picture, though, the future water storage capacity for the Melbourne system. She rose to be the head of the statistics laboratory and was awarded an honorary master's in 1985. So there's sort of women working in these different areas. Prior to digitisation, there was an established array of electromechanical machines, and this technology was used for large-scale data processing, but they didn't have stored programming on this equipment. Machines like this were found in offices throughout the country from the 1920s. This shows a complete setup for the accounting department at Carlton and United. Notice the women are wearing uniforms. This shows that they're part of the office staff and not considered professional staff. In 1946, Australia entered the digital age with the start of the building of a digital computer, which had stored programming, and general purpose automatic computer. And Trevor Pearcey came to work at the CSIRO and decided to build a computer. And when he started, he had this group of women working. They were his female computing staff. And in fact, for a long time, I really didn't realise these women actually existed. All the text talks about Trevor Pearcey, but in fact, he had this staff of very capable women, both professional and sub-professional. If you didn't have a degree, you were called sub-professional. And they were working on mathematical work for the radio astronomy data that was coming through at that time in the 1940s. So Trevor Pearcey actually built a computer on site at the Sydney University. And this is the machine he was able to produce, now known as CIRAC. The women in his team probably worked on the punch cards that was creating the information to feed into it, but they did not participate in working on that computer. Gradually, there were computers adopted across a whole range of facilities, universities and commercial activities and government groups from the 1950s. And this opened up a whole range of new jobs, which were classified as managers and systems analysts, programmers and coders, console operators, key punch operators, and servicemen and engineers. So this started a whole range of new positions. On research so far, I think that Margaret Oates was probably the first female computer programmer in Australia. While other women were working on computers, they were employed as operators and librarians, but she was a programmer. She completed a degree in maths in 1952 at Sydney and was working and was then employed on the computer UTCOM, which was at the University of New South Wales in the 1950s, and she was the programmer there. This photo shows that when she was working on IBM's computer that was installed in 1958, their first computer in Australia. And it's a Women's Weekly article, and I just thought the author does talk about her work and the complexities of it, but then he goes on to say, she looks like a perfectly normal girl, even though she likes computers, mathematics, organisation, logic, is practical in most things and actually keeps appointments. Anyway, she eventually returned to the public service and got married in 1965, but on her card, her employment card, it notes that unusually she still wants to be known by her maiden name. In 1962, the Women's Weekly was advocating programming as a career for women because of equal pay opportunities. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this chart shows the type of job distribution by sex that was available at that time. And clearly the male staff were controlled as managers. There's only one female manager, but the key punch operators are very, very definitely a female role. And this is the sort of a room showing them working in quite cramped conditions to create all those punch cards that was required to feed into the museum, the computers. The demand for computer education increased rapidly in response to the rising number of installations. Pearcey taught classes at the University of Sydney, and his staff attended the lectures. So there were women right from the 1940s looking into computation education. And computer centres on campuses ran training courses from the 1950s, and students and staff now had access to computing facilities and computer-trained staff for research. The first academic course in computing was at Sydney in 1959. Probably the first PhD was 1961 by Jeff Hill at Melbourne. And Jenny Seabury was awarded her PhD in computational mathematics at La Trobe in 1971 and became the first female professor of computer science in Australia in 1987. That's a photo on the right is Monash's first computer at Clayton, but on the left is quite an interesting reflection on how computers now would be able to help research. Pearl Levine was a member of staff and major figure in Australian computing, and she was based at Caulfield Institute of Technology, now Monash Caulfield campus. She came to Australia in 1962 and feeling a bit bored with her, she had 2 small children, but she was a bit bored, so she enrolled in a certificate of electronic data processing course at Caulfield in 1964. 3 weeks later, they offered her a job and she was there for the next 25 years and completed, ran the Piercy Centre with that group. Like Mary Whitehead, she had to also support the fact that her staff should wear pants to work. And that's 20 years after Mary Whitehead allowed them out at Woomera. Pearl was appointed a Fellow of the Australian Computing Society in 1990. And of the 83 fellows listed in 1990, there were 7 women. This is a very brief survey of the areas where women were working in computing in Australia up to the mid-20th century. Ada Lovelace was supported by her family to study maths, and 100 years later, women still required the support to make career choices, continue with access to higher education, and work in fields without gendered stereotyping. Women made major contributions to research, information science, and computing education. Behind the scenes, large numbers of women were employed in data processing. Women have participated in computing activities in Australia for more than 100 years. You just have to look for them. Thank you.
Wow, what a whirlwind history that was. As we now move from the history into the future and think not only about where women in computing has come from and how far we've come, but also what's next. So I'm really delighted to chair this panel, such an amazing group of women. My name's Yolandi Strangers. I'm a professor here at the Faculty of IT, and I'm also our Associate Dean for Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, the inaugural Associate Dean. And we still do a lot of work to support women and girls in engaging in careers in STEM and in IT. We'll talk a little bit about that today as well. So I'd like to introduce our panel. So I'll start with Ruchi on the far right, my far right over there. So Ruchi is a PhD candidate with us in Monash Faculty of Information Technology, and she's also a facilitator for one of our programs to support women and girls kind of coming into IT called Superbots, which we run with Monash Tech School. So welcome, Ruchi. I'm just going to give very quick introductions here because, as I said, it's a half hour of power. And next we have Rebecca Ostergaard, who is the Chief Digital Officer at CSIRO. Welcome, Rebecca. And then we have Catherine Lopez, who is Director of Obsto Analytics, a non-executive director at Environmental Protection Agency of Victoria, and co-founder of Ada's Tribe, which we'll hear a little bit about today as well. And finally, we have Professor Maria Garcia-Labunda, who is a professor in our optimization group here at Monash Faculty of Information Technology, and all, I should say, key advocates of women in technology and in STEM. So welcome, everyone. Now, I asked our panel to bring an artifact or think of a memory that really spoke to their history of being a woman in computing, just to sort of give us a bit of a sense and introduce us to everyone. So I also brought one myself, which is, I'll just start by giving you that, Maria, which is a book I wrote a few years ago called The Smart Wife with my colleague, Jenny Kennedy. And this book is really about how the history of the lack of women in computing has affected the feminization of digital voice assistants that we still have today, the legacy of those kinds of biases and underrepresentation of women. And it really shows how that has sort of manifested now. And it was a really big journey for me to learn about the, I guess, the impact of having that underrepresentation, both historically and today, the impact of that on the technologies that we're designing now and the things that we have in our homes and that we all engage with and speak to. So that was a big learning curve for me. Maria, what's your artifact or your story?
My artifact is this. It's a t-shirt. And it's interesting for two things. First, to me, at least, for me, it's memorable because it was from the university, that first university that I visited as a postdoc to see whether I liked it, a postdoc visit to a research group. And it was in Tucson, Arizona, and it was my first overseas visit, and I loved it. The second, I don't know whether you see the size. For me, I bought this for me, and I wear this for me, and at that time I was much thinner. So why I bought it something so big? Because that's what I used to wear for work and at conferences. I used to cover myself in such a way that it was not clear. It was not immediately clear that I was a woman. I would wear jeans and oversized jeans, oversized t-shirts. Why? Because I was trying to avoid things like two things I'm going to just mention. One, my first big conference in which I had as in good high quality conference, PEPM 93. By the way, cotton from 1994, amazing. In which the chair, I was having a chat I was with my supervisor, he was introducing me to people, and there was the chair, and he was asking to people and said, "And you are the wife of?" That was my introduction to the chair. Luckily, I could answer, "I'm the wife of no one, and I'm the presenter of the next talk," just by luck, right? Just by luck. So not something that I like. Or in an even earlier conference in which I just went to attend, I was elected Miss Gulp 91. Not that I, yes, that face, exactly. I was totally ashamed. I never put my hand for it. There was a Miss and a Mr., thankfully. At least there was a Mr. Truly, I'm not joking. There was actually a little group that elected a Miss and a Mr. And then they told us that we had to go, well, don't get me started. So since then, and that was my introduction. I had just finished my degree. I was starting my PhD, and I was horrified that everyone was going to remember me as a Miss whatever, rather than for my work. So I covered myself quite successfully. Thank you.
Wow, I can relate so much. And I think my story back to the really, really young age. So I grew up as a Asian family, and both my from my mom's side and their academics and different professors. So I had a really easy access to all my uncle, aunties, math teacher, biology teacher, geography teacher. So abacus is the one thing I remembered very clearly. That was abacus introduced in the class, when the grade 4. So at that time, already, that's the toy in the house. And I use that just for so often. And so that is a part where the lesson they give to us is say, well, you add it up, from 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100. And I did it so quickly, the teacher couldn't say, like, hey, the first thing is say, how can a girl do like this? So they were literally put me on the side, and so they said, you're cheating. Second thing, they were like, so then actually I was so lucky, I think, in a way there, and I went to talk to my parents, and so I transferred school, by the way. So I transferred school, and then the math teacher, and so she said, well, I put it on the side, come to private kind of, after school, because we had a math Olympia. And at that time, only boys, and only boys that were selected in the school for 5 at the, from the primary school. And then my math teacher said, you come over here after school, finish I was allowed to participate in running, in arts, and in drumming, and then public speaking, anything else, but not in Olympia, math Olympia. So she private tutored me, and, after school, and using the material where the boys were studying. And so then I was able to participate in grade 6. So that is the part where I think my journey, they never stopped. The big t-shirt, I still have it. And so use pajamas now. It's so huge, right? I think that's the way of, the abacus, and I put an abacus as a keychain on my daughter's school bag. And we have an abacus showing in the home office. So that is the thing where I think that is the first, if you talk back to the computing called to the woman, so that is carried and now it just progressed to different computer, to different, advanced computer. That's my story.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My story, I don't think I have a story that's really related to my experience in computing as a female, although I probably do, but maybe they're not obvious to me. But I think what I want to talk about is I was really interested in the history of women in computing in Australia and the difference between what that looked like and what technology looks like now and how different it is and how you support women and attract women into that field. And I just thought I'd share a story about my first experience with a computer and actually how that didn't attract me into the field. And it will also show my age. So it was when I was at school and I was 16 years old, and we got a computer at the school and we were allowed some time on it. It was printing out one of those punch cards. We got to go in, print out the punch card, and the result of the punch card was that we printed out Happy Easter Mum on a dot matrix printer. Or and the letters were made up of stars, and I think so for me I think that didn't actually excite me into computing, and so when you think about getting women into computing and how to drive a passion for that, I'm not sure what the answer is, because sometimes your passion develops as you develop more knowledge in that space, rather than through a kind of a innate passion in something. But I think there are a lot of opportunities for women in technology these days, and it's changed so much. I think it's become, it's fascinating where we're at with AI and really underpinning so many different things in our world these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. When I think about my earliest memories of computing, I was a 90s kid, so not very historic there. But what I remember is, bulky computers, disk operating systems, the black floppies, and Windows 95 and all that jazz. So I was trying to forage through my study and see, what object I could come up with. And actually what I found was this floppy disk. So floppy disk, which is the 3.5 inches one, and late 90s, early 2000s, when these beauties were being phased out to make way for CDs. Why this is special for me is first that, it has escaped my mum's spring cleaning sprees. So, for its resilience and anti-fragility. But also, this floppy disk has all the circuit diagrams and my reports from my final year of engineering. So I'm a reformed electronics and telecom engineer. And, combining the electronics and telecom engineering and mechanical engineering, I think we were about 6 girls in a batch of about 110 boys. So we actually worked on a final year automatic sensing vacuum cleaner, way before all these Roombas became popular. And, we were coding machine language by hand. But then when it was time for testing, the boys actually sent me out to do field testing and talk to people. And, I was outraged. I said, is that what you think? Like, am I not good enough for the technical expertise that's required? However, their response was that, oh, you're actually better than all of us here. But I think what women also brought in their mind were other skills like the communication and empathy and a genuine interest in the work practices and the life practices of people. So they said, that's what they thought that a girl was bringing into their team. So which actually quite made it special. So here's the floppy disk from the late 90s, I guess.
Wow, thank you so much, all of you, for sharing those stories. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to kind of get that rich sense of history from just people who are living in the industry and working in the industry now. So my next question is about what the legacy of Ada Lovelace means for you. I'm not sure if I want to get to the future as well, and I know we're strapped for time, so I might just go to a couple of you, and then we'll see how we're going. Catherine, I particularly wanted to ask you this question as the founder of Ada's Tribe. which has the namesake of Ada Lovelace. Could you tell us a bit about what the legacy means for Ada's tribe and a bit about the work and the network that you lead?
Sure. Actually, before the Ada's tribe was formed, and the legacy which Ada Lovelace has created, and I tell you, it's way more than the community. And this is extra story behind the. So when there was back in the days where we both, my husband and I, work in the software company, development company. We have full of our, colleagues, and a few of us, we all nerdy computing programmers, and we are having children together. As I was pregnant and their wife was pregnant. So basically we said, oh, we're going to name their children using a computer language. And we raised our hands up. So we already know the gender. So that is a part, the other people say, oh, I'm going to name Pearl, that I know I'm going to name him Python and Lua and all this, and Pascal and all this funny, nobody chose C++, C#. And somebody said Java, so I said, we said Ada. So Ada is, because we already know the other language, that's the first program, and we know the gender. And at the end of the day, we all, like all of us, and only we were seriously. And so then we named, so my daughter is named under the, after the Ada Lovelace. And the story is basically carried with me. And so now come to the legacy of when the Ada's tribe, which is a community started from Melbourne, but now went beyond Melbourne, now Sydney and also overseas as well. So it is a community supporting women in Ada stand for analytics, data science, and AI. So like being a formal, or I think I call myself as a data scientist, and the other Lovelace is what's the pioneer in the AI field, we call it, right? But actually the motivation, why we decided to do this, not only the acronym is Ada, because the support. So basically there are two missions and we try to achieve. A is one, we will break the fear for people, if you are female and if you're from other field, and so you can come to do analytics, you can do data, you can do AI. The second part, which is really, really missing from the legacy and a great, the presentation, it's about the supporting and the networking and the, so this is the part where we stand alone, and it is really hard for us, to do any transition. So it doesn't matter which is from academic to industry or from different field. So that's the, the legacy, which is two things were from Ada Lovelace, and they will say, we built this community now is really, so thank you for inviting me here. And, but, so this is really great. I wish we would see more. I was talking with Yolanda, and I say, I wish to see more celebration about bring women in computing and celebrate the Ada Lovelace Day. And I think the future will. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great segue into moving forward, I think, more into the future. But just before I do that, can people sign up to Ada Lovelace? You can just go on LinkedIn, can't you, and
yes.
Join the group?
Yeah, so now we actually is changing a platform, become more, like we have to study the social media and which platform is more accessible. So most likely we will be transferring to a group on LinkedIn. But now, you can follow us on LinkedIn. And then we have the, you sign up the email mailing list and you can see the community. We do have a platform as well. It's on the Martin network, but it's not very popular or, so we are still assessing different technologies right now. So join us and then follow us on LinkedIn, and also the platform for the networking is also on Martin Networks. It's showing there.
Great. Thank you for that, Catherine. So, Rebecca, I might go to you next. And the next question is really about how you see the role of women having changed. So we've heard a bit about the past and the history of women in computing. What has changed since, Barbara's history, or even, in your careers kind of term? What have you seen? What kind of progress have we made? And What does Ada do next?
I think that there definitely is change. I think I might just make a comment about the legacy of Ada Lovelace before I move on to what's changed. I think what one of the things that is interesting about Ada is how much of a leg up she had. You know, she was aristocratic and she had a scientific. Her mother had a scientific bent, and obviously very creative, intelligent father who really so there's the genetic part of that, but also the leg up in society and the networks, and I don't fashion myself, I'm not in that league, but I had parents who were scientific as well, so I was kind of indoctrinated with maths and science from an early age. So I think that from a legacy perspective, what is interesting is to think about how to put that in front of young women, girls who don't have that kind of starting point. You know, how do you get them excited about maths and science in the early phases of their life? So how, in terms of how things have changed since I started, I would say slowly. When I was studying computer science, I was probably about 10% women, and in preparation for this event, I looked up, well, what are the percentages today? And I'm not sure what it is exactly in Australia, but I did see a number of around 20% of women in the United States studying engineering and maths. So there's still a long way to go. I think that technology, I mean, I like the word technology, just the broad brush technology, and moving away from kind of separating out IT or something from the rest of what's happening. I think that we're moving towards a world where technology is embedded in everything we do, and it needs to be more integrated in our organizations. So you don't have kind of the business side and the IT side. It's all just technology is just integral to everything we do. And I think there's opportunities, as you were saying, Ruchi, that around women, you know, they tend to, it's hard to stereotype, isn't it? But they tend to, what steers them away from computing could be the need for more of a social career or something like that. But I think the opportunities, and in technology, in my experience, is all about collaboration and communication and working as teams. So I think we need to kind of accentuate that part of the role to bring people, more women into the field.
Absolutely. Ruchi, you seem to, yeah.
I add to that. I'm actually studying a PhD at the moment. And when I reflect back on my history, my mum didn't make it to high school. Actually, neither of my parents did. But they were both strong proponents of education because they deeply understood the value of education and how it was a great equalizer. And they had a great amount of belief in me, sometimes, unreasonable amount of belief in me. So, in the microcosm of my little world, I've experienced those generational changes and also the changes in thinking and attitudes. This is acknowledging that a lot of the sisters around the world and young women still are deprived of that access to schools and access to education. However, when thinking about how the changes have unfolded, in the global north perspective and context, I do see that there are more doors of opportunities. However, thinking back, I don't think that the barriers have necessarily gone down. Like new barriers have come up. So, when we talk about biases, or we talk about stereotyping, or we talk about limiting beliefs. And, as an educator, I always feel that we are studying and researching in institutions that were primarily made for men. Institutions where, the places are, we use diversity and equity and inclusion and women's safety as bolt-ons, or something that needs to be done as an icing on the cake, after everything is done. So there are still lots and lots of barriers to get to the doors. So I see new doors of opportunities, but I don't know if it's easier. And there are substantial challenges still in actually accessing or getting to those doors.
Thanks for that, Ruchi. Look, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to take us into the future. And Maria, you're going to walk through the door with us. You've got to get your crystal ball out. And I wanted to ask the panel what the future of computing and the future for women in computing in particular is going to look like. What's next? Where will we be in 2050? I asked ChatGPT this question, and to be honest, the answer wasn't that great. I did send it around to the panel, so they've heard what ChatGPT had to say, and if we had more time, I would read you out the answer. But to be honest, I think the people here have more interesting things to tell us about the future. So I'm going to pass to you, Maria.
Sure.
Where to next?
I'll get my crystal ball. 2050, it's 25 plus years from now. So not less than one since I graduated from my PhD. And I look back and things have changed a lot. So I'm hoping that, but I think that okay. This is how I always talk. 25 years in the future, what will happen there depends on what happens now and what happens from now to then, right? We can use the Ada Lovelace legacy too, because I think that we have a lot of components of her life that had been made her successful. Her family support, of course, her wealth, but you know, the bias towards mathematics and well, education in general. Let's just say education, opportunities. A really good mentor, Mary Somersville, who was a great person who introduced her to Babbage. So the networks, all these things. And I learned today, Turing, I mean, the importance of Turing coming back and saying this is a very important role model. That is massive. So if we keep on doing these things, if we can keep on having, making sure that people have good mentors, making sure that there is networks for opportunities, because, you know, honestly, I don't want to be equal in the sense of I don't want to be a man. I just want to have the same opportunities, right? And the same support and the same, so opportunities, support, and then recognition and respect for it. So if we have these ingredients, the hope is that in 25 years might be a bit too early, but you know, in 50, we don't even have to talk anymore about this. You know, it's like with other movements of saying, you know, why do we have to have an actor who's gay? Well, why do we have to have a programmer who's a woman and make a point of it? It should be normal. That's what I'm hoping for, that at some point in time in the future, we don't need to, we have already created all the support networks, everything, for it not to be necessary to do. But until then, I have to say that, for example, the Me Too movement made a very significant change in my research community already, because it allowed a lot of people to talk about, hey, why don't we have a parity in women in panels, speakers, PC committees, chairs of conferences, or at least more women. So I don't know what's going to happen, but that's my hope. My hope is that then in the future, we have seeded all the things to happen, that we can stop worrying about it, and yeah, we have true equity. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Maria. Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? We can't just kind of look to the future. We have to plan for it now and get all the ingredients right. Look, we're almost out of time. Do you think you could have a 1-minute response to the future?
Sorry,
No, that's okay. Or would one of you like to, anything burning to say about 2050? Catherine, you've got the microphone. Where do you think we're going? What do you think will be, where do we think we'll be by 2050? Will it be improved?
Well, I view this is now I'm getting too much influence from children. I quite often say IDK, I don't know. But you know, I am very optimistic of the reason we're here today, because we are making a voice of what we want to say in the future. So that's everything. So basically, like Ada Tribe, a very big thing we do is mentorship and mentor opportunities. And so that is if we can help with even in this, any events which is I attend or, you know, our community, if you can inspire or just give hope or, you know, make one person to think something along this line, we are on the track. It's in terms of time, I did a PhD half in forecasting, and I don't really do the numerical number of forecasting of 2050. But I think every incremental counts.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Rebecca, parting words?
I'm kind of in the same boat, IDK. But I think we are heading in the right direction, and it's actually just about continuing to talk about it and raise the profile of women in technology, and to be, continually promoting women, and also thinking about how we can encourage women into the field.
Fantastic. And Ruchi?
Thinking about the future, I think about my experience running the Superbots program, specifically because, we run that with year 7 to 9 schoolgirls who actually come in to do industry IT immersion, where they design and develop and test their own voice bots like Siri and Alexa. And I have witnessed firsthand. So it's not about, developing their skills. I actually see that they have all the ingredients that need to be there, whether we talk about creative thinking, problem solving, ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, persist and persevere when the compiler, makes you extremely grumpy. So they've got all the right ingredients. So they've got the chops to do it, but it's about, making them believe that, don't rule it out, unless you've tried it. So I think that's where the challenge lies. And that's where I see when interacting with the schoolgirls and the challenge is not to let the societal stereotypes become their opinion of themselves, because that's when they start limiting themselves and they actually start to rule out options even before giving it a go. So if we can do things such as Superbots program, where they can, maybe dip their fingers or take a dive and explore the big, wonderful world of computing and then decide for themselves, I think that would be amazing. I actually met Ita Richardson, who's a women software engineer for Ireland, and she actually said something that stuck with me. She said, a rising tide lifts all boats. So she said, we often talk about women in IT as if this is something that we do for women, but I think having women in computing is what you need if you want to have that world in 2050, where we aspire to have a world which is social and just, or where technologies are serving the people that they're made to build. So it is not something that you're doing for women. You're not encouraging women for women, but it is a precondition and a prerequisite to get to where we want to be as a world and as a global community.
Thanks so much, Ruchi. A fantastic note to end on. And sorry,
I just had
let's end on another note.
one final thought. I think, and I suspect that computer science courses and similar courses look very similar to how they looked 30 years ago. And I just wonder if there's not an opportunity to think about, are they still, making sure that the learning content is attractive as well to women, but it's not all, deeply technical, but it has other aspects to it as well that encourage that social communication and teamwork type skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've covered a lot of ground, I think from the 1800s to 2050. And I have to say those responses were much more interesting than ChatGPT. So I was right on that one. Please join me in thanking our wonderful speakers today and also our panelists. And thanks to everyone who's joined us online as well as in person. And I hope you can stay for some lunch to continue the conversation with us. Thank you.